I was tired of being told that I couldn't do it. So I was like, well, if no one's going to take me seriously, then I'm going to make them take me seriously.
Welcome to the 9 to 5 Quitters Club, the podcast uncovering the creator entrepreneurs at the forefront of a work revolution. Today, we're speaking with Abagail Pumphrey, entrepreneur, designer, podcaster, writer, and founder of Boss Project, where she helps small businesses grow and stay thriving online. In this episode, we'll dive into her journey to becoming a creator.
It was this or figure out how to qualify for disability, which as a self-employed person was not something I was excited about trying to figure out.
Her incredible path to success and how she got there.
I made my first $100,000 in 8 months, and then I doubled it 4 months later.
And make sure to stick around until the end for the truth behind passive income in this industry and how you can actually build long-term wealth as a creator.
If we're looking for long-term compounding growth, the only place you can do that is in the stock market, is in investment portfolios.
As we enter the new year, this episode is a perfect combination of inspiration, practical advice, and copy and paste tips you can use to make the way you work for you. Let's dive in, and we hope you enjoy this conversation with Abagail Pumphrey.
So when I started my business, I did so a lot out of necessity. I was working full-time as a graphic designer. I'd kind of hopped around from corporate to a startup, engineering firm, all these different roles. And while I loved it, it was definitely a volatile time in the market. And we were still kind of coming off the back end of the recession. And so jobs would come up and then they would go away, whole departments would go away. And my entire first part of my career was just very up and down. And I remember being laid off for the second time and feeling like, I just don't know if I can do this again. I don't know if I want to go look for another traditional job. I am feeling really called to do something on my own. And at the time, I didn't really know what that looked like, but I had an inkling that everything I had done in corporate to date is all things I could do privately for my own clients. And so I didn't necessarily change everything about my life at that point. I was doing a lot of the same work. The main difference was I was sourcing my own clients and my own projects and getting paid for those. But I was able, with that kind of trajectory, to replace my salary in 30 days. I made my first $100,000 in 8 months, and then I doubled it 4 months later. All of that to say that about a year and a half or so into business, I was in a 5-car collision. And at that point, I became very sick. I suffered a traumatic brain injury, and the business I had built was more of a traditional agency where you have clients, you have services, you're doing the client work. And I just had a very unpredictable set of circumstances where I just didn't know when I was going to feel good. I didn't know when I was going to be able to show up. And I had always, dreamed of being more of an educator, but there wasn't a lot of examples of what this looked like. I feel like I'm sort of like part of the second wave of the creator economy. There are some dare I say, dinosaurs in the space.
Goats, dinosaurs, yeah.
Like Tony Robbins and
Yeah.
Jeff Walker, who
Yeah.
paved the way for what it looked like to be a coach or a teacher in an online capacity. But there wasn't any women at that point really showing up and being a huge leader in this space. And I was like, maybe this is a thing. Maybe this is something I could try. But at the time, I was so young. I really don't think I took it as seriously as I may have now. I think then it felt a lot more like an experiment. Like, let's just give it a go. And if it doesn't work out, I have plenty of other marketable skills. It didn't feel as risky. I just felt like I could try it and see what happened. And I fell in love with it, and I was incredibly good at it.
You said you had an inkling you could do this yourself. Was that just raw confidence? Did you have other people you saw going and doing that? Was it your space was not performing as well as you thought you could on your own? Like, where'd that come from?
Well, I had a pretty big ego in my early 20s. I was very, very self-confident, and I was passed up for a lot of promotions in the early part of my career. And almost every single time, they were like, they'd even interview me for the position, but they're like, you have the skill set and the leadership, but you're just so young. And I was tired of being told how young I was. I was tired of being told that I couldn't do it because of the position I was at in my career. I wanted to be a leader and I wanted to help kind of pave the way for the next set of people, but I wasn't being taken seriously. And so I was like, well, if no one's going to take me seriously, then I'm going to make them take me seriously.
It sounds like at first you weren't doing any digital products. You knew you could do
Not
coaching, you
initially.
could do
No.
yeah,
When
yeah.
I started my business, it was exclusively one-to-one services. I broke into digital products. I definitely tested something, about 9 months in, I did my first webinar. I sold my first course. I dabbled a little bit in an attempt at a membership, which 4 whole people joined. And then it wasn't another year or so until I like officially had my first launch with like a digital product that worked and took off and actually showed me that this was a plausible way to make revenue sustainably.
And that was after your car accident?
It was after my car accident.
Okay, interesting. So that forced you to find another way
Yeah.
to make
I was it was this or figure out how to qualify for disability, which as a self-employed person was not something I was excited about trying to figure out.
or not even tenable in some situations.
Oh, 100%. I
Yeah.
might not qualify in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For someone listening that maybe doesn't grasp it, they know there's like they've seen masterclass, so they know online courses exist as a thing. They know coaches exist and all of that. At this point, where you've been in business for how many years now?
9 and some change.
Yeah. So can you just give us explain it to my grandpa who like gets that you make money but doesn't quite get how.
Okay, well, if I was explaining it to your grandpa, I'd probably talk
Who's a
about the
smart
fact
guy, but
that I teach online and I get paid to do non-traditional education for adults. And so in a lot of ways, what I do is an alternative to going back to school and getting an MBA or pursuing some sort of entrepreneurial program that you might see at a more traditional college. But I provide courses that are typically more specific in subject matter. So I have a broad range of topics that I talk about, anywhere from marketing and sales to building your specific offer. But I don't necessarily have them all packaged up. People can kind of pick and choose their own adventure. In terms of how the business is made up, I do have a mix of different offers. So I have some low price entry point digital products that are all under $100. I have some midpoint courses and I'm kind of working on revamping some of that, but those will end up being in the range of 3 to 500. I also have an ongoing membership that makes up almost 50% of my revenue. And that is access to an entire library of digital products, which I have thousands at this point. So I don't necessarily recommend that as a strategy. I think you can totally build a membership, but it does not need to be nearly as complicated as the one that I run today. And then I also am doing brand deals and sponsorships, and I run my own podcast. And so ultimately, those deals make up an additional 15 to 20% of my revenue. So it is a mix of digital products, courses, membership, and sponsorship, and then also affiliate. So I will also make commission on other people's products that I sell.
We'll be right back after this brief message. This podcast is brought to you by Teachable and therefore has no sponsors. So we just wanted to take a moment to encourage you to go check out Boss Project and the podcast, The Strategy Hour, where Abagail shares business strategies, interviews, and actionable advice for building an online business your way. Creators like Abagail are the reason this podcast exists, so supporting them helps support our ability to bring you more of their stories and lessons. You can find more from Abagail at bossproject.com, which is also linked in the show notes or description wherever you're watching or listening. Now let's get back to the episode. I love that you compare yourself, you didn't say it exactly like this, but to a school, that you
Yeah.
are an alternative to that. As someone who didn't go to college and just learned from YouTube and creators like yourself, creators like yourself, my career to creators like yourself, is it that ego you had that makes you feel like you're qualified to do that when so many people feel like they need a stamp of approval to be this, or is it just seeing that there's an underrepresentation of the voice you have to offer?
I did go to college. I did get my undergrad and I have a fine art degree. So I was well aware of the sort of curriculum that I was kind of running through in that major and the kinds of things that I was required to know to be able to graduate. I also did a ton of classes in the journalism school where they tend to have more of like the business and entrepreneurial programs. And I ended up quitting my master's degree. So I was pursuing a master's in journalism while I was actually working for the university I was going to school at because they were paying for my master's degree. Let's be real. And I found that sitting in that position, that all the things I had access to were so incredibly outdated. Like they
Mm,
were not relevant in today's time. They were not relevant. The moment I graduated, it would have been a decade old knowledge. And I just really felt like there's this hole in this market for people who are fast moving. Even last week, and props to him. I know he attempted to make it as relevant as possible, but I just bought a book that Gary Vee published
mm.
about social media. I can tell as someone who actively pays attention to the social media market and what's moving that the contents of that book is 6 to 9 months out of date. Social media moves so fast that the book that I picked up and I read the day that it released was already out of date. And
Sure.
so to be fast moving in a world that just is absolutely changing at a lightning fast pace, you have to be able to learn in an environment that is much more agile than the traditional education system. I worked in a university, I saw what it looked like. I knew went into higher education, and it's hyper political. It is super focused on meeting standards that were set by people that aren't even actively doing those roles in their day-to-day lives. And honestly, if I were to go back to school now in a more traditional sense, I would purposely pick a university that's in a large city where the
Mm,
majority of the professors are actively working in the career I was interested in versus one that had been teaching in a position and only been teaching for a set number of years because their perspectives are just so radically different. But in terms of what gave me permission, you don't need permission to be able to teach online. I don't need to give you permission to those of you listening to be able to go out and pursue the things you want to pursue. You just have to be willing to try and see who will listen and see how it'll impact people. And when I saw I could make a real change in people's lives and they could tangibly earn more revenue to provide more of the life and lifestyle that they were after, I knew I couldn't stop and I needed to continue to impact people.
At this point, like you started this business, you were doing everything yourself. Now you have a team of 3?
It's me and 3 other full-time people. I've had up to a staff of 10 full-time people, as well as a broad mix of contractors. I think when I had the biggest team, it was 10 full-time, and about 20 additional contractors. So it
Wow.
was wild.
So as someone who's gone through that whole journey of doing it all yourself, then identifying what you like or don't like to do, offloading that, what's the identity in your business, in your work that you could see doing into your 80s?
Sure. So, if you had asked me a couple of years ago, I would have told you that I'm more of an operator, that I
Mm.
like to be with the team, fostering those relationships, really leading those people and helping them grow in their own career. I also love the financial side of the business, really understanding how cash flow works and what goes into making something profitable, especially when you have large overhead. When my overhead was at its height, it was more per month just to break even than my old salary was for an entire year. So having to earn an entire year's worth of salary in a single month, every single month, it was a lot of pressure. But right now, I would definitely consider myself more of a creator. And in some ways, I have gone through these phases where I felt like I had to like be this like hyper professional and like build this big team and all of this stuff. And as much as I can do it and capable of doing it, have proven I can do it, that's not the life or lifestyle that I want in this time and space. And I much prefer getting in the weeds and thinking about how can I teach? How can I show up online and create concepts and make something that feels approachable for people? So I love producing content for social. I love recording my podcast. I love teaching the actual curriculum inside of my programs. And that's where I want to spend the majority of my time right now.
When you look at the state of the creator economy at the moment, where do you think it's at in its life? And do you have a sense of where it's going, how you think it's going to impact the world? Because to me, it's like
Yeah.
it's Silicon Valley in the 90s. Like we are just getting started here.
I mean, that's definitely a close equivalent. We are very early. Ultimately, the majority of the people teaching online were alive when the internet didn't exist. And that's a really wild concept. So when we were born, the jobs we have today were not even an inkling for anyone. Like it wasn't an option. Most of these jobs weren't even viable, until the early to mid 2000s. And so I would say we're less than 20 years into what is going to be a century long plus, trajectory. People are never going to stop learning. That's not going away anytime soon. How people learn is going to rapidly evolve. And I really think we're at the next kind of phase of what's possible. I think, in fact, you're going to start to see bigger universities and more traditional education look to our industry to see what are they doing differently to attract people. Because at the end of the day, they're still businesses and they still need people to come and show up and pay them money. And college has become less and less attractive due to the sheer amount of money that it costs to walk away with a degree. And in many cases, a certificate from a certain program is just as big of a caliper as like an actual diploma. And so I think we are so early. I definitely feel like, not that I would equate myself to this man by any means, but I feel like we're, in Steve Jobs' garage right now. Like it is early. And there's some like definite we like people who had been trying and doing stuff. Think of, if you think about his life and his career, there was like the Netscape and the like Dell and like those other early companies, but those have like faded away. And the people that are massive today are the ones that were kind of in wave 2 and 3.
Mm.
And I think I consider myself a part of wave 2. I think there's already a wave 3 and already a wave 4 in existence. We are still up. We're still going up. I was an early adopter in the grand scheme of things to an industry that's brand new.
As someone who came from pretty humble roots, you are now what I think most people would call objectively quite well off. You've built that by helping people and in probably one of the most ethical ways I can imagine. What is just that element like to have built arguably generational wealth with your knowledge and to be in that position given your background?
Yeah. The dichotomy that I want to see change around this, there's a lot of people selling this idea that you can go into this and you can be wealthy. And I don't disagree that you can go into this and be wealthy, but they make it seem like the wealth is exclusively from the business.
Mm,
And my business is just a vehicle. Okay? I earn great money from this business. I make a salary and I make profit distributions. But the power from that is what I do with it after I've made that money. This is a cash flow engine. I can make, 30x what the market is doing in any given year if I'm on it in terms of return, in terms of a dollar in, a dollar out. But if we're looking for long-term compounding growth, the only place you can do that is in the stock market, is in investment portfolios. And so the majority of my money has not been earned from this business. The majority of my money has been earned from running this business lean, making a profit, living below my means so I have enough money to invest in my future and saving and working with financial professionals to set me up for the long haul. That wouldn't have been possible if I hadn't done step 2. And so many people are going to sell you on that it's all the business, and it's freaking not. It's not. And the majority of them that are wealthy, it's because they gave their money to some sort of financial advisor on the back end too. So do not let them fool you. It is not all from their business.
I really appreciated you pulling that veil back because it is still like you need to find the way to make the money, but wealth
Yes,
is generated
you
yeah,
have to have money to make money. That is absolutely true. This is how you make it enough that you can invest it.
the most wealth is still made in the boring stuff, right?
100%. It's made
Yeah.
in the stuff you don't touch.
Yeah. So also that's probably very sound advice for someone who maybe follows that dream of being a creator, makes a bunch of money and now has a bunch of money, don't just spend it all.
I recently saw this post going around of like that they think the majority of influencers will end up bankrupt. A lot of it is because ultimately your image is fleeting. And, I said this early on in my career, and people are like, you're crazy. And I'm like, who's going to listen to me after I look a certain way? I know that sounds absolutely insane, but like, people want you young and vibrant and early and like, uh, they want to still feel relatable to you. And once you get past either a certain point in wealth or a certain age or a certain look, you're not as viable in the market. And so you're going to make your money early, but
Mm.
you have to be willing to stay a little scrappy and not to say you can't enjoy it. I live in my dream home, but that wasn't something I purchased immediately. I waited a long time before I made the jump to the next thing. And I lived in a much smaller house than I needed to for much longer so that I could save. And I don't regret any of that.
It's paid off. You've
Yeah. I I own my home. I It's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And I can retire in 10 years if I want to.
Do you think you will?
I don't know what I would do. I mean, I think I might do other things. I don't necessarily have any plans of closing this business anytime soon. I'm taking it a year, 2 years at a time and kind of seeing what that looks like, but, you know, I also would love to run a flower farm or get into the gravel business with Jonah. uh, sell something that's a bit more low pressure and
Yeah.
less visible online. But a lot of those things are also hard work and labor intensive. And,
Yeah.
if I don't have to work, maybe I'll travel. Who we'll see. I haven't decided. I'm not worried about the future because I'm financially secure,
Hmm.
which is a nice feeling to have, but I also know that that gives me the freedom to choose in the moment where I want to go.
I think why I'm in this industry, why I love doing my work is this journey, and the backbone of this journey is that desire to share and to educate. And I know you said you had an ego to like start it, but I still think there's a lot of humility that comes with this form of
Oh,
education,
that
you know.
ego got broken very early.
Well,
I
but
may have had it to start, but I was quickly humbled. So don't worry.
yeah. Well, and at the base of this whole economy, whether you're selling digital products or just a speaker or any of that, it is that desire to share. I hear a lot of creators almost think of it as like a hack. You want to grow an audience, educate, because it works. I know you say it's what you want to do, but like why?
Well, I think I want to add to what's available out there for free because I wouldn't have built the business I have today if I wasn't able to search and find all these little answers along the way. And they didn't answer everything for me. I absolutely had to try and fail and make mistakes. But now more than ever, almost everything is searchable and you can find some sort of answer that's going to help you move forward. But I choose to show up because I know it makes a difference and because I know it helps inspire people. And I do think there is a movement away, and we will continue to see this shift, but specifically on Instagram and TikTok, there is a shift away from people consuming as much educational content. People come to those platforms to be entertained. I think there's an opportunity as an educator to find new ways to create edu- educainment of
Yeah.
sorts where like you get to bring people into the fold but still make it entertaining. And so I think if you are a good storyteller, you can be a great educator. And storytelling is a massive part of what makes this sticky. And you're going to need to do more of it. Now, if you wanted to like strictly educate and only talk about certain subjects, then I would maybe pick a platform like YouTube where you can make your content highly searchable and answer someone's question. Like we're putting in a new sliding glass door and the molding has to be different than all the other doors because the casement is just different. And so I was trying to explain to my father-in-law how I wanted to build this and he was like, "Okay, I think I'm following you." And I was like, "It's more of this craftsman style." I'm like, "Here, boop boop boop. Here's this guy teaching the kind of molding style I want on this particular door. I, I don't have to sit there and draw a picture of what I want. I can just send him a video." And so, that stuff is happening all the time where you can also create content that allows people to more easily communicate. And in a lot of ways, yeah, that video was for him, but I sought it out to teach him something so I could better communicate what I was looking for. And so you're going to start to see this in corporate too, where bosses are like, I need to train people, but I don't have all the time to sit down and walk them through all of these concepts. I'm going to align myself with people that are teaching in this industry that I align with their values, I align with how they're showing up, and I'm going to put my actual employees in front of this content to do the heavy lifting for me.
Hmm.
So, I think the education will always be on social platforms. I don't think that's going away. I do think you have to be nimble and understand how the culture shifts on those platforms because, I loved me a carousel post on Instagram that would teach something back in the day, but that is just not what's working right now. And
Yeah.
you have to stay up on it. Like me being immersed in the social media world is a requirement for the kind of work that I do.
We'll be right back after this quick break. This podcast is brought to you by Teachable, the platform that empowers you to share your knowledge, engage deeply with your audience, and earn all on your own terms. Because you are more than your 9-to-5, and Teachable has everything you need to grow the business or side hustle you think about while you're at your day job. You can get started turning your knowledge into a business for free at teachable.com. That's teachable.com, which is also linked in the show notes or description wherever you're watching or listening. Okay, now back to the episode. You mentioned you think colleges are going to look to this industry for how they function, how they structure. What role do you see them have when teachers can just leave those structures and do this on their own?
They're struggling. They're already struggling. It's already happening. They may not be publicizing it. They have good PR teams, but colleges are losing teachers faster than ever. Departments are shutting down, programs are shutting down. My sister is an interior architect and an adjunct professor at a local university, and her department is at risk of completely going away. She has been offered the job, but it has been set up to be so shitty that it doesn't make any sense for her to do it. She would cut her salary in more than half to do 2 to 3 times the amount of work that she's doing right now. And people are just tired of it. Like they're tired of being taken advantage of. And so, I get it. There's a lot at play. It costs a lot of money to run these buildings and keep them operational. I get it. I understand why teachers are making what they're making. I don't necessarily think these colleges are sitting on a pile of cash and just not sharing it. I don't necessarily think that's what's happening. Buildings and property cost money. And the older they get, the more they cost. And I think unless they start adopting more online options, it's going to become completely non-affordable. In terms of how do they keep them, I think they have to create environments where it's attractive to do it part-time. Because unless they get more part-time teachers, I don't think it's going to make sense long-term.
Would that be your advice if all the Ivy League presidents put you in a room and said, tell us how to stay relevant?
I would employ more people that are working in the industry, period, whatever industry they're teaching. And I purposefully stay in it. Like I ran an agency for years and shut it down to focus on teaching. And the moment I started to feel a lack of understanding about what my clients were going through, I reopened my agency. I started taking one-on-one clients again. I started working with people, going through the client process, understanding the needs of that environment so that I could better serve the people I was teaching. And it's so necessary. You have to be in it alongside of people. The people who aren't tend to start sharing things that are less relevant or they're more relevant to this like late stage where the majority of people just aren't. More people are starting, and that's always going to be true. And you have to figure out how can I stay relevant to the people who are still at the beginning.
Before we wrap up here, I just have some rapid fire questions for you. Favorite part about having your husband work for you?
Ooh, well, day dates. We can, go for lunch whenever. I can demand Chick-fil-A, and we just get in the car and go. And it doesn't matter what day of the week it is. It's pretty great.
Love it. Top 2 things to do visiting Kansas City if someone comes.
I highly recommend the Nelson Atkins Museum. It's our fine art museum, and the block building is modern art and it's beautiful. I also would get some Kansas City barbecue because you can't come to Kansas City without getting some barbecue. I'd probably send you to Q39.
Number one piece of advice for someone who wants to do what you do but doesn't think they can.
Oh, you got to work on that mindset first. You got to believe that you can, or it's not going to happen. Like, I could tell you just go post or go build the product or go whatever, but you have to have the self-belief first. You have to believe it's possible for you. And if you don't, you need to find examples that show and prove to you that it is. Or look at your life and really analyze, what is the proof that I am capable? Like, put that evidence back in front of yourself so that you can really see what you're capable of.
Excited to talk to you in the near future, Abagail.
Thanks for having me.
Abagail is a great example of what it means to be fearless in the face of potential failure. There isn't a single successful creator out there who got it all right from the start, and Abagail shows us that you have to be willing to throw yourself out there to know how the world will receive you and potentially build the life for yourself that you've always wanted. I hope you learned as much as I did today, found something you can apply to your own life, and if nothing else, we're inspired by Abagail's story to take a hard look at the 9-to-5 work you do and make sure the way you work and learn is working for you. If you want to join the thousands of other creative entrepreneurs who are building an income out of their impact, click the link in the description to join the club and learn how Teachable can help you do the same. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and check out our recommended next episode linked here. Thanks again for being here, and we'll catch you in the next one.